11-year-old Zora Jackson stands trembling before microphones in a corporate boardroom, dozens of stunned white executives frozen in their seats. The company's stock price plummets on screens behind them as Zora holds up a flash drive. "The system isn't broken, someone disabled it," she says calmly. The CEO, Morgan Whitfield, goes deathly pale as security rushes in. What no one realizes is how this moment will transform not just Whitfield Industries, but the entire financial sector. Marcus Jackson arrived at Whitfield Industries headquarters at 4:30 in the morning, just as he had for the past 7 years. The maintenance supervisor for the 60-story glass and steel building that housed one of America's fastest-growing financial technology companies, Marcus took pride in his work despite the daily slights and suspicions he endured as the only black supervisor on staff. His daughter Zora often accompanied him after school, a quiet, observant child who preferred the company of her laptop to the awkward interactions with executives' children in the company daycare. At 11 years old, Zora possessed an uncanny aptitude for computers, a gift inherited from her mother Tiana, who had passed away 2 years earlier. From an aggressive cancer their insurance had deemed experimental treatment and refused to cover. Today, as Marcus worked on fixing a persistent issue with the executive floor's climate control system, Zora sat cross-legged in the corner of an unused conference room, watching a series of cybersecurity tutorials her mother had recorded before her death. "Always look for patterns, baby girl," Tiana's voice instructed from the video. "Systems don't just break, they're either poorly designed or someone breaks them on purpose." Zora nodded as if her mother could see her, then minimized the video as footsteps approached. Through the glass partition, she watched as Bradley Cooper, the company's chief financial officer, hurried past with several board members she recognized from the company website. Their faces were tense, voices hushed as they swiped into the server room, a heavily restricted area that required special clearance. Glancing at her watch, Zora frowned. It was nearly 7 in the evening, long after most executives usually departed in their luxury vehicles. More curious still, the security guard who normally monitored this floor was absent from his post. As Zora gathered her things to find her father, she noticed something else unusual. A small device attached to the security camera outside the server room, its tiny red light indicating it was interfering with the feed. Recording this observation in the digital journal her mother had taught her to keep, Zora felt a flutter of unease. Over the next few weeks, she documented more anomalies. Midnight entries in the building's visitor log when the building should have been empty. Security cameras that mysteriously went offline during specific time periods. Restricted areas suddenly accessible when they should have remained locked. Her father had taught her to be observant but cautious, a necessary survival skill for black people navigating predominantly white spaces. "Keep your head down but your eyes open," he often said. One evening, while helping her father collect trash from executive offices, Zora overheard Cooper speaking tensely on the phone in his corner office. "The system modifications are complete," he said, his voice barely audible. "The auditors won't find anything, I've made sure of it. The acquisition can proceed on schedule." When he mentioned system modifications, Zora's interest piqued immediately. As her father's master keycard gave them access to nearly every room in the building, Zora began formulating a plan to investigate further. What she didn't realize was that her innocent curiosity was about to uncover a conspiracy that would threaten not just her father's livelihood, but potentially their lives. As Zora lay in bed that night in their modest apartment 15 miles from the gleaming Whitfield Tower, she replayed her mother's words. "Systems don't just break. They're either poorly designed or someone breaks them on purpose." Something was happening at Whitfield Industries, and Zora couldn't shake the feeling that it was the latter, someone was breaking something on purpose. What she couldn't yet understand was why, or how deeply her family would become entangled in the dangerous web of corporate deception that was about to unravel. The following Monday, Marcus returned home with a heaviness that Zora immediately recognized. His usually straight posture was bent, his eyes avoiding hers as he placed his lunch container in the sink. "Dad, what happened?" she asked, setting aside her homework. Marcus sighed deeply before explaining how he'd been called to human resources after finding financial documents in the trash outside Bradley Cooper's office. documents marked confidential that detailed unusual transfers to offshore accounts. "They accused me of snooping," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Said I had no business looking at anything I found while cleaning. Mrs. Winters from HR said she was giving me a courtesy warning this time, but next time." He didn't need to finish. Zora understood the threat. Their life balanced on the precarious edge of her father's employment, the health insurance, the rent for their small apartment, her school fees. Later that night, unable to sleep, Zora overheard her father on the phone with Aunt Latrice. "We might need to move again," he whispered, thinking Zora couldn't hear. This would be the 4th time since Tiana died. "I don't know how to explain to Zora that no matter how hard I work, some places just don't want us to succeed." The pain in his voice crystallized something in Zora's mind. Using her mother's old laptop, she made a decision that would alter their lives forever. Before Tiana Jackson had become too ill to work, she had been a mid-level programmer at Whitfield Industries, specializing in security protocols. Though never promoted despite her talents, she had maintained access credentials that, according to her, might come in handy someday. Tiana had shown Zora how to use them, just in case, though she never specified what case that might be. That night, after ensuring her father was asleep, Zora used those credentials to access the company network remotely. The username and password still worked evidently. No one had bothered to delete the access of a black female programmer who had left the company 2 years ago. Within the system, Zora discovered strange anomalies code insertions in the financial reporting system that seemed designed to filter and alter data before it reached the auditing protocols. Though only 11, Zora had absorbed enough from her mother's tutorials to recognize that these insertions weren't meant to fix problems, but to create specific outcomes. She took careful screenshots, documenting the alterations, storing them in an encrypted folder as her mother had taught her. What Zora didn't realize was that her digital footprints hadn't gone unnoticed. The next morning, Bradley Cooper called an emergency meeting with the IT security team. "Someone accessed our system last night using credentials that should have been deleted years ago," he informed them, his voice cold with controlled fury. "I want to know who it was, and I want enhanced security protocols implemented immediately." He paused, then added, "and put special emphasis on monitoring the maintenance staff. They have too much access as it is." Within days, new security measures appeared throughout the building. Maintenance staff, particularly her father, were required to scan their badges at every doorway, their movements tracked and timed. Guards who had previously greeted Marcus warmly now watched him with suspicious eyes. Zora noticed these changes with growing alarm, but rather than deterring her, they strengthened her resolve. The following week, while accompanying her father to work because her usual after-school sitter was unavailable, Zora overheard Cooper in conversation with Morgan Whitfield, the CEO. "The system adjustments are working perfectly," Cooper was saying. "The quarterly reports show exactly what we need them to show. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, the acquisition will be complete, and we'll all be significantly richer men." Whitfield laughed, a sound that sent chills down Zora's spine. "And they say the system is broken. It's working exactly as we've designed it to." That night, Zora dug deeper into the company's systems, carefully documenting each discovery. What she found shocked even her developing understanding of corporate ethics. Whitfield Industries had been systematically manipulating their financial reports, inflating profits by over $3 billion to drive up their stock price artificially. The timing aligned perfectly with their impending acquisition of several smaller companies, many of which, Zora noticed with growing anger, were owned by people of color. As she continued her investigation, she realized she needed to work quickly. The board meeting to finalize the acquisition was scheduled for the following month, and once those papers were signed, the damage would be irreversible. What she didn't know was that Bradley Cooper had narrowed down the list of possible security breaches to former employees whose credentials remained active, and Tiana Jackson's name was now at the top of his list. The annual Take Your Child to Work Day arrived with perfect timing for Zora's investigation. Dressed in her neatest clothes, a purple button-up shirt and black pants her father had saved for months to purchase, she joined the children of executives and managers for tours of various departments. While most kids gravitated toward the flashier marketing division with its free branded merchandise, Zora waited patiently for the technology department tour. There she met Lily Chen, a junior programmer whose subtle exclusion from the company's inner circle was visible in small ways, her desk positioned in a corner away from the team, her suggestions overlooked in the morning meeting, Zora observed. During a demonstration of the company's proprietary financial software, Zora raised her hand. "What prevents someone from changing how the system reports numbers?" she asked innocently. The room fell silent. The tour guide, a senior programmer named Richard Whitfield, stared at her with narrowed eyes. "And you are?" he asked, though the visitor badge clearly displayed her name. "Zora Jackson. My dad is the maintenance supervisor," she replied, maintaining eye contact despite the sudden tension. Westfield exchanged glances with another programmer before responding. "Our systems have multiple safeguards and authentication requirements. Why would you ask about changing numbers?" Before Zora could answer, a security guard appeared at the doorway. "Miss Jackson, you're needed elsewhere," he announced, his tone brooking no argument. As he escorted her from the room, Zora noticed the other children, all white or Asian from affluent families, continued their tour uninterrupted. The guard delivered her to the company daycare, where she was told to remain until her father's shift ended. That afternoon, Lily Chen found Zora in the lobby, waiting for her father to complete his closing rounds. "Your question was good," Lily said quietly, sitting beside her. "Too good, actually." After checking that no one was within earshot, Lily confided that the programming team had been ordered to implement what management called special accounting modules without the usual documentation or peer review. "When I asked questions, I was reminded that my work visa renewal depends on company sponsorship," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But something doesn't feel right." Zora carefully considered how much to reveal. "My mom was a programmer here before she died," she offered. "She always said that systems don't just break, they're either poorly designed or someone breaks them on purpose." Lily's eyes widened slightly. "Your mother was Tiana Jackson? She wrote some of our core security protocols. Everyone wondered why she left so suddenly." Zora swallowed the lump in her throat. "She got sick. The company insurance wouldn't cover her treatment." Something passed across Lily's face recognition, then anger. "That explains some things," she murmured. Over the next 2 weeks, Zora noticed security guards following her father around the building, checking his badge repeatedly, questioning his presence in certain areas, despite his supervisory role requiring him to access all parts of the facility. Twice, she caught Cooper watching her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Using her growing friendship with Lily as cover, Zora continued gathering evidence. She secretly recorded conversations in the executive lounge when bringing Lily lunch, captured screenshots of the manipulated code during brief moments at Lily's workstation, and documented the pattern of minority-owned businesses being targeted for acquisition after suspicious stock devaluations. Everything she collected went onto a special flash drive her mother had given her before dying, one with military-grade encryption that Tiana had obtained during her brief consultation work with a defense contractor. "Information is power, Zora," her mother had told her, "but only if you can protect it." The flash drive remained hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Hidden Figures on her bookshelf, a location that made Zora smile at the symmetry. Her father returned home one evening, his expression more troubled than usual. "They accused me of stealing office supplies today," he said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "Pens and paper clips, Zora." "Paper clips?" He laughed without humor. 20 years of perfect employment records, and now I'm being written up for paper clips no one can prove I took." Zora felt cold fear settling in her stomach. The accusations were escalating, becoming more frequent. Time was running out. The board meeting was just 2 weeks away, and the evidence she had gathered, while compelling, still lacked the smoking gun that would definitively prove intent to defraud. As her father showered, washing away another day of undeserved suspicion, Zora made a decision. She would need to approach someone with authority who might listen, someone who could help stop what was happening before her father became the company's scapegoat. The CEO's daughter, Amanda Whitfield, was in high school but occasionally visited the building. Known for her passionate speeches about corporate social responsibility at school functions, Amanda seemed like their best hope for an ally within the Whitfield inner circle. What Zora didn't yet understand was how deeply the rot had penetrated and how dangerous it would be to trust anyone connected to Whitfield Industries. The opportunity to approach Amanda Whitfield came sooner than expected. The following Monday, the CEO's daughter arrived at Whitfield Tower for a photo shoot highlighting the company's supposed commitment to diversity initiatives, a irony not lost on Zora, as she observed Amanda posing with the company's few employees of color, all strategically placed behind her for maximum visual impact. After the photographer finished, Zora carefully approached Amanda in the lobby cafe. "Excuse me, Amanda? I'm Zora Jackson. My dad works in maintenance here. Could I talk to you about something important?" she asked, her heart pounding. Amanda, 17 and polished in the way that extreme privilege allows, regarded Zora with practiced benevolence. "Of course. Dad's always saying we should engage with staff at all levels." They sat at a corner table, Amanda checking her phone periodically as Zora carefully framed her concerns. Without revealing the extent of her investigation, she described the increasing harassment her father faced and the suspicious system modifications she'd observed while helping Lily Chen. "I think something bad is happening with the company's reporting systems, and they're setting my dad up to take the blame," Zora concluded. Amanda's expression shifted subtly throughout the conversation, from polite interest to sharp attention and finally to something unreadable. "That's a serious accusation," she said finally. "I'll definitely talk to my father about this. Can you send me any evidence you have? I want to make sure he takes this seriously." Against her better judgment, but desperate for help, Zora emailed Amanda screenshots of some of the less incriminating evidence from a temporary account she'd created. "Thank you," Zora said, relief washing over her. "My dad's a good person. He doesn't deserve what's happening." Amanda smiled, placing a manicured hand over Zora's. "Of course. We take care of our Whitfield family." That evening, Marcus was summoned to clean the executive boardroom after hours, an unusual request that immediately set alarm bells ringing for Zora. "Let me come with you," she begged. But Marcus insisted she stay with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Washington. "It's probably nothing, baby girl. Just some special meeting mess they need cleaned up." Hours later, Marcus returned home, his expression unreadable as he sat heavily at their small kitchen table. "They offered me a promotion," he said finally, the words falling like stones. "Facilities manager at their Phoenix branch. 30% salary increase, relocation bonus, company housing for the first 6 months." Zora felt her stomach drop. "Phoenix? That's thousands of miles away. My school, my friends." She stopped, understanding dawning. "They want us gone." Marcus nodded slowly. "Mr. Whitfield himself was there, said they've been watching my work for months and want to reward my dedication." His bitter laugh held no humor. "When I asked for time to consider, Bradley Cooper mentioned how unfortunate it would be if budget cuts forced them to eliminate my current position entirely. The threat was clear: accept the exile or be fired." "They know," Zora whispered. Amanda told them. Marcus looked at his daughter sharply. "Told them what, Zora? What have you been doing?" Before she could answer, their apartment door crashed open. 2 men in dark clothing rushed in, faces concealed by ski masks. "Don't move," one shouted, while the other began ransacking the apartment. Marcus pushed Zora behind him, facing the intruders with the quiet dignity that had sustained him through years of discrimination. "Take whatever you want," he said calmly. "Just don't hurt my daughter." The search was methodical, focused. When they reached Zora's room, she heard them muttering about a laptop. Terror froze her blood as she realized what they were looking for. But her mother's laptop wasn't there. Following Tiana's paranoid but prescient advice, Zora had begun storing it in a lockbox at the public library, retrieving it only when needed. After 10 terrifying minutes, the men departed, leaving their apartment in shambles but taking only Zora's school tablet. Random burglary, the responding police officer suggested without conducting more than a cursory investigation. "You folks might want to consider moving to a better neighborhood." The officer's eyes lingered on Marcus's maintenance uniform hanging by the door, His implication clear black people in modest housing should expect crime. Neither Zora nor Marcus mentioned their suspicions about the timing or the targeted nature of the search. Once alone, Marcus held his daughter's shoulders firmly. "Zora, what have you gotten into?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. Zora took a deep breath and revealed everything: her investigation, the evidence she'd gathered, her conversation with Amanda. Instead of the anger she expected, Marcus's expression shifted to profound worry. "These are powerful, dangerous people, Zora. They've built careers on making problems disappear." He paced their small living room, weighing impossible options. "If we run, we're finished. No references, no future employment. If we stay and fight," he didn't need to finish. They both understood the risks. "Mom would fight," Zora said quietly. Marcus stopped pacing, his eyes filling with tears. "Your mother had a terminal diagnosis when she decided to fight. We still have something to lose." They sat in silence, the ruins of their home around them, until Marcus finally spoke again. "We need help someone outside Whitfield's influence." He reached for his phone, scrolling to a contact he rarely used. "Your mother had a colleague, Jamal Washington. He teaches computer science at the community college now. If anyone would believe us, it would be him." What neither of them realized as Marcus made the call was that their apartment had been bugged during the break-in. Every word they spoke now traveled directly to Bradley Cooper's office, where Amanda Whitfield sat with her father, listening to the desperate plans of a family they viewed as insignificant obstacles to their billion-dollar scheme. Professor Jamal Washington's office at Bay Area Community College contrasted sharply with the sleek modernism of Whitfield Tower. Books lined every wall, computer parts occupied most flat surfaces, and the faint scent of electronics and coffee permeated the air. The distinguished computer scientist had left Silicon Valley at the height of his career, citing the tech industry's persistent racism as his primary reason. When you're the only black face in every meeting and the last to be promoted despite leading in patents and innovations, you eventually get the message, he told Marcus and Zora as they sat across from his cluttered desk. After listening to their story and examining the evidence Zora had gathered, Jamal removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Tiana always said Whitfield was corrupt to the core. That's why she built back doors into everything she designed, their insurance policies," she called them. He smiled sadly at Zora. "Your mother was brilliant and justifiably paranoid. If she showed you how to access those systems, she must have suspected something like this might happen." Jamal's analysis confirmed Zora's worst fears. Whitfield Industries had created a sophisticated fraud scheme that had potentially cost shareholders billions while targeting minority-owned businesses for hostile takeovers at Prote. Artificially depressed prices. "This is bigger than harassment or discrimination," Jamal explained. "This is securities fraud, wire fraud, possibly RICO violations, federal crimes with serious penalties." He paused, considering. But corporations like Whitfield have armies of lawyers and friends in high places. Evidence gets lost, witnesses get discredited, cases get settled quietly with no admissions of wrongdoing. Marcus nodded grimly. "So what can we do?" Jamal hesitated before responding. "I know someone who might help Valencia Torres. She was a financial crimes investigator until last year, when she was forced out after trying to open an investigation into Whitfield Industries." Valencia agreed to meet them that evening at a small Salvadoran restaurant 10 miles from campus, far from Whitfield's likely surveillance. Dark-eyed and intense, Valencia listened without interruption as they shared their story and evidence. "I spent 2 years tracking Whitfield's acquisition patterns," she revealed after they finished. "They consistently target successful minority-owned businesses, manipulate market conditions to drive down their stock values, then acquire them at pennies on the dollar. Afterward, they strip the assets, fire the founders, and absorb the patents and client lists." Her hands clenched around her coffee cup. "When I tried to launch an official investigation, mysterious complaints appeared in my personnel file. Former colleagues stopped returning my calls. Eventually, my supervisor called me unstable and suggested I take medical leave. When I refused, they found a technicality to terminate me." The familiar pattern wasn't lost on any of them. Successful professionals of color systematically undermined and discredited when they threatened white corporate power. "What we need," Valencia said, leaning forward, "is irrefutable evidence that can't be buried or explained away. Something so public that no amount of political connections can make it disappear." For the next week, Zora, Marcus, Jamal, and Valencia formed an underground alliance, meeting in different locations each time to avoid detection. Using Jamal's academic credentials, they accessed financial databases that revealed the full extent of Whitfield's scheme. The company had not only manipulated their own financial reporting, but had systematically attacked the stock values of 7 minority-owned technology firms, all scheduled for acquisition votes at the upcoming board meeting. "They've created a perfect storm," Valencia explained, showing them market trend analyses. First, they plant rumors about security vulnerabilities in these companies' products. Then, they use shell companies to short the stocks while simultaneously having their banking division call in loans they've extended to these businesses. Jamal continued the explanation. Meanwhile, they're showing inflated profits to their own shareholders, claiming their proprietary AI financial models are responsible for their success, when really they're just cooking the books. The more they uncovered, the more dangerous their position became. Marcus reported being followed to and from work. Jamal found his office broken into, though campus security dismissed it as routine vandalism. Valencia's apartment was damaged in a suspicious water leak that destroyed many of her personal records. "They're sending warnings," Valencia observed grimly. "Next will come more serious consequences." Time was running against them. The board meeting when final acquisition papers would be signed was now just 1 week away. They needed more concrete evidence to overcome the company's powerful legal team and political connections. "What we need is access to their internal systems during the actual board meeting," Jamal mused. "If we could show their actual code modifications in real time while they're presenting fabricated figures to shareholders and the press." Zora, who had been quietly listening, suddenly straightened. "The annual Family Day celebration is this Friday," she said. "All employees are encouraged to bring family members for tours and activities. Security is more relaxed because there are children everywhere." Valencia's eyes lit with understanding. "And with your father's maintenance access combined with my investigative experience, we could access areas normally off-limits," Zora finished. "Plus, I'm small enough to reach places adults can't." Marcus looked appalled. "Absolutely not. I won't put you in danger, Zora." But his daughter's expression, so like her mother's when she'd made up her mind, told him this argument was already lost. "Dad, I'm already in danger." "We all are," she said quietly. "Mom would fight. She taught me to fight too." As they finalized their plan for Friday's infiltration, none of them noticed the dark sedan parked across the street, its occupant photographing everyone entering and leaving the restaurant. The following morning, those photographs would land on Morgan Whitfield's desk, alongside a comprehensive report detailing each member of their small resistance. The CEO's response was immediate: eliminate these threats permanently. Family Day at Whitfield Industries transformed the normally austere corporate headquarters into a carnival-like atmosphere. Balloon arches welcomed visitors at every entrance. Caricature artists drew executives with comically large heads in the lobby, and the cafeteria offered an elaborate buffet featuring cuisine from around the world, a visual testament to the company's supposed commitment to diversity. Marcus arrived early for his shift, Zora by his side as usual, both of them hyper-aware of the dangers but committed to their plan. Valencia would arrive later, posing as Marcus's cousin visiting from out of town. Jamal remained off-site, ready to analyze whatever data they managed to extract. The day progressed with excruciating slowness as they waited for their opportunity. Zora participated in children's activities, keeping up appearances while observing security patterns and staff rotations. She noted that many regular guards had been replaced with unfamiliar faces, a concerning development they hadn't anticipated. At precisely 2:30 in the afternoon, the executive floor was scheduled to host a special presentation for families about Whitfield's innovation pipeline. As crowds moved toward the large conference center, Valencia slipped away from the tour group and met Zora near the maintenance elevator, a service lift rarely used by anyone except cleaning staff. "Ready?" Valencia asked, her voice barely audible over the ambient noise of distant children and music. Zora nodded, her small hand steady as she held the special access card her father had provided one that would grant them entry to the server rooms where the most damning evidence likely resided. Using her small stature to advantage, Zora helped Valencia navigate through the building's less monitored areas. When they encountered a particularly narrow maintenance shaft that Valencia couldn't fit through, Zora continued alone, following the memorized path to the secondary server room, where Lily Chen had mentioned the special modules were stored. Inside, the temperature dropped noticeably. Computer equipment needed constant cooling as Zora connected a special device Jamal had provided. The small box began copying server data immediately, its progress bar creeping forward with agonizing slowness. While waiting, Zora accessed a terminal using her mother's credentials, searching specifically for records related to the targeted companies. What she found confirmed their worst suspicions and revealed new horrors: emails between Cooper and Whitfield discussing how unsophisticated minority business owners would be easy to manipulate, projections showing how the acquired companies would be dismantled with employees terminated, and detailed strategies for exploiting legal loopholes to avoid regulatory oversight. Most damning of all, Zora discovered internal communications explicitly discussing how to disable safeguards Zora Jackson had built into the financial reporting systems, safeguards specifically designed to prevent the very fraud being committed. "Your mother was a problem," one email from Cooper to Whitfield read, "but her illness solved that for us." The cold calculation of these words, the casual dismissal of her mother's life, sent ice through Zora's veins. She copied everything onto the specialized drive, her hands shaking not with fear but with rage. Meanwhile, Marcus faced increasing harassment on the job. His break times were monitored to the second, his workspace had been relocated to a former storage closet with poor ventilation, and white colleagues avoided him in hallways and elevators. Today, these subtle aggressions intensified. His supervisor followed him throughout the building, questioning every task and timing his bathroom breaks. When Marcus attempted to access the executive floor for routine maintenance, his badge mysteriously malfunctioned. "System must be glitching," the security guard said with a smirk that suggested otherwise. "You'll have to wait while I call upstairs for permission." The glitch kept Marcus separated from Zora for nearly 40 minutes, precious time they couldn't afford to lose. When he finally reached the executive level, he found himself blocked from several areas he normally maintained. New security protocols, explained a guard he'd never seen before. Certain areas are restricted during events with children present. The excuse was transparent: no such restriction had existed during previous family days. Valencia, meanwhile, used her investigative skills to access the legal department during a fire alarm drill. There, she discovered draft acquisition documents revealing that several minority-owned businesses were being acquired by Whitfield Industries at severely undervalued prices, some at less than 20% of their actual market value, before Whitfield's manipulation began. More disturbing still, the documents included provisions that would terminate all existing senior leadership upon acquisition, predominantly people of color, replacing them with pre-selected white executives already on Whitfield's payroll. As Valencia photographed these documents with a concealed camera, she didn't notice the security camera in the corner of the room, its red light blinking as it captured her every move. Reuniting at their predetermined meeting point near the south stairwell, Zora, Valencia, and Marcus quickly exchanged findings. They had gathered substantial evidence, but the board meeting where final acquisition papers would be signed was still 2 days away. "We need to get this information to Jamal immediately," Valencia whispered. "He can begin analyzing it while we figure out how to present it publicly in a way that can't be buried." As they prepared to leave the building separately to avoid suspicion, Bradley Cooper's voice came over the public address system. "Attention all Whitfield family and friends. As a special treat to conclude our Family Day festivities, we invite everyone to the main auditorium for a surprise announcement about our company's future." The announcement, they realized, offered perfect cover for their departure. Everyone would be moving toward the auditorium, leaving exit routes less monitored. As Marcus and Valencia joined the crowds heading downstairs, Zora slipped away to return her father's access card to his locker. Passing by Cooper's office, she overheard him speaking tensely on the phone. They were here today, all three of them. The janitor, his brat, and that disgraced investigator. They've been in restricted areas. After a pause, he continued. Yes, I understand the board meeting is crucial. Don't worry, they won't have time to use whatever they found. I've made arrangements. The cold certainty in his voice sent panic through Zora. Rushing to find her father and Valencia, she realized with growing horror that their time had run out. They now had less than 48 hours to gather their remaining evidence and figure out how to expose the truth before the board meeting. And based on Cooper's conversation, Whitfield's executives were already moving to neutralize them. The following morning dawned with tentative hope as Zora, Marcus, Valencia, and Jamal gathered in the professor's office to analyze their findings. The evidence they had compiled painted a damning picture of corporate malfeasance, systematic fraud, targeted discrimination, and calculated destruction of minority-owned businesses for profit. This goes beyond financial crimes, Jamal said, reviewing the documents Valencia had photographed. There's a clear pattern of racial targeting in their acquisition strategy. They've specifically identified businesses owned by people of color, then created artificial crises to devalue them. Valencia nodded grimly. Classic, predatory behavior, but with a racial component that should interest civil rights organizations and certain divisions of the Justice Department. The flash drive Zora had filled with server data proved even more valuable than they had hoped. It contained not just evidence of code manipulation, but detailed communications between executives discussing how to circumvent regulations specifically designed to prevent discrimination in corporate acquisitions. We need to get this to someone who can act on it immediately, Marcus said, checking his watch. The board meeting was now just 36 hours away. The press, Valencia suggested. A major publication with the resources to withstand legal intimidation. After careful consideration, they settled on Aidan Fitzgerald, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate wrongdoing. His recent series on pharmaceutical price gouging had led to congressional hearings and actual policy changes, a rarity in corporate accountability journalism. More importantly, he had a reputation for protecting his sources. Jamal arranged a meeting for that afternoon at a public library 10 miles from campus. Neutral ground, lots of witnesses, multiple exits, he explained. Safest option under the circumstances. They arrived separately, Valencia and Zora entering through the main entrance, while Marcus and Jamal used the side door. Aidan Fitzgerald was already waiting in a reserved study room, his lanky frame hunched over a laptop. Balding and bespectacled, he looked more like an accountant than a journalist known for taking down powerful corporations. Professor Washington, he greeted Jamal with a firm handshake. It's been a while. As they settled around the table, Zora noticed something odd. Fitzgerald seemed unusually interested in her, his eyes repeatedly returning to her face as Jamal explained their situation. When Valencia began presenting their evidence, the journalist's questions focused more on how they had obtained the information than on its content. "And you're certain this material came from Whitfield's secure servers?" he asked, his tone just slightly too eager. "You can verify chain of custody?" A chill ran down Zora's spine as she recalled her mother's warnings about trusting too easily. Catching Valencia's eye, she made a subtle gesture they had established earlier, a signal to proceed with caution. Valencia smoothly pivoted, providing less specific details about their methods while emphasizing the content of their findings. As the meeting progressed, Fitzgerald's questions became increasingly focused on their identities and future plans. When he suggested they provide him with all their evidence for safekeeping, alarm bells rang loudly for everyone. "We'd prefer to maintain copies while you verify what we've shared so far," Jamal countered smoothly. "Standard journalistic practice, protect your sources, right?" Fitzgerald's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. I'll need to verify with my editor before proceeding anyway. The Daily Financial Chronicle has strict protocols for stories of this magnitude." The mention of his publication sent another warning signal. Zora had researched major financial publications the night before and discovered that the Daily Financial Chronicle was owned by a media conglomerate whose major shareholder was Morgan Whitfield's brother-in-law. As they concluded the meeting, Fitzgerald's parting comment confirmed their worst fears. "This is explosive material. I'll be in touch very soon, likely with some of my colleagues who specialize in corporate governance." The emphasis on very soon carried an unmistakable threat. They separated immediately after leaving the library, following their predetermined emergency protocol. Valencia headed north while Marcus and Zora went south, with Jamal taking a circuitous route back to campus. They had agreed to maintain radio silence for 2 hours before reconvening at their secondary location, a 24-hour diner owned by Valencia's cousin in a working-class neighborhood far from both Whitfield Tower and the university. Zora and Marcus had barely reached the bus stop when Marcus's phone rang the caller ID showing Whitfield Industries. With a sense of dread, he answered on speakerphone. "Jackson," came the cold voice of the head of security. "Your presence is required at headquarters immediately. We have evidence you've stolen company property." Before Marcus could respond, the caller continued. "Security footage shows you accessing restricted areas yesterday. Report to the main lobby within the hour, or we'll be forced to involve the authorities." The line went dead. Marcus and Zora exchanged terrified glances. "They know," Zora whispered. Fitzgerald told them. Marcus nodded grimly. The meeting was a setup. They wanted to identify everyone involved. Instead of heading to Whitfield Tower, they boarded a bus traveling in the opposite direction, Marcus's mind racing through limited options. They needed to warn Valencia and Jamal, but using their phones now seemed too risky. 20 minutes later, as the bus approached their neighborhood, Zora gasped at the sight of police cars surrounding their apartment building. "Dad," she whispered, clutching his arm. Marcus pulled her close. "Stay calm, baby girl. We knew this might happen." They remained on the bus, passing their stop as Marcus tried to formulate a new plan. Their emergency cash and spare clothes were in the apartment, now inaccessible. They had the evidence on the flash drive, but with Whitfield's resources and connections, how long before they were found? As if in answer to that unspoken question, Marcus's phone lit up with an automated alert from his banking app. "Your accounts have been frozen pending investigation of suspicious activity." Their financial resources had just been cut off. Meanwhile, Valencia arrived at the community college to warn Jamal, only to find campus security escorting him from his office. "This is ridiculous," the professor was protesting as officers carried boxes of his equipment. "I have tenure. You can't seize my research materials without cause." The head of security, a man Valencia had never seen before, responded coldly, "We received credible reports you're using university resources for unauthorized activities. The board has approved this action pending investigation." Valencia retreated before being noticed, her heart pounding. Whitfield's reach extended further than they had anticipated. Using a burner phone purchased for emergencies, she tried contacting Marcus, then Jamal, receiving no response from either. Following their emergency protocol, she headed toward the designated meeting place, constantly checking to ensure she wasn't being followed. By 7 that evening, only Valencia had arrived at the diner. After waiting 90 anxious minutes, she used the burner phone to check local news, her blood turning to ice at the headline. "Financial whistleblower investigation turns criminal. Former investigator faces fraud charges." The article named her specifically, citing anonymous sources claiming she had attempted to extort Whitfield Industries using fabricated evidence. More alarming still was the mention of accomplices, including a maintenance worker believed to be fleeing with his juvenile daughter. Marcus and Zora had become fugitives in the span of a single afternoon. Meanwhile, across town, Zora and Marcus huddled in the back room of a small Ethiopian restaurant owned by a former co-worker of Tiana's. "You can stay tonight," the owner whispered, "but they're looking everywhere for you. Your pictures are all over the news." Marcus thanked her, his expression haunted as he watched Zora pretending to sleep on a makeshift bed of tablecloths. His phone, powered off to prevent tracking, contained a final message from Jamal. "Police have my equipment. Professional license suspended based on anonymous complaints. V facing criminal charges. Meeting compromised. Trust no one. With the adults in her underground alliance neutralized and her father now labeled a criminal, 11-year-old Zora Jackson realized with crushing clarity that the responsibility for exposing Whitfield's corruption now rested solely on her small shoulders. As her father finally drifted into restless sleep, she silently retrieved the flash drive from its hiding place sewn into her jacket lining. Tomorrow was the board meeting, their last chance to expose the truth before the acquisitions were finalized. With all adult avenues blocked, Zora began formulating a desperate, dangerous plan that she would have to execute entirely alone. Before dawn, while Marcus still slept, Zora slipped from their temporary sanctuary with a handwritten note left on her pillow. "Dad gone to finish what Mom started. Don't worry, trust me. Love, Z." She carried nothing except the flash drive, $47 saved from her allowance, and her mother's old employee ID card. Her destination, Whitfield Tower, where the board meeting and shareholder presentation would begin at 9 that morning. The building would be filled with executives, board members, major shareholders, and media representatives, the perfect audience for the truth she carried. Her first step involved contacting the one potential ally remaining inside Whitfield Industries. Using a public library computer that opened at 6, Zora sent a carefully worded email to Lily Chen. "The system isn't broken, someone disabled it. Need access to building for board meeting. My mother's safeguards can be reactivated. Please help." She included a secure messaging app address for response, then spent 30 agonizing minutes waiting, acutely aware that each passing second brought her father closer to discovering her absence, and the authorities closer to finding them both. At 6:34 the response came, security heightened. Media entrance least monitored. Your father's uniform in his locker. Keycard still active. Will help if possible. Be careful. Zora's heart pounded as she deleted the messages and left the library. She had no illusions about the dangers ahead if caught. She would likely be separated from her father indefinitely, perhaps placed in foster care, while he faced fabricated criminal charges. Worse, if Whitfield's executives were desperate enough to frame them for crimes, what other actions might they take to protect billions in fraudulent gains? Pushing these fears aside, Zora focused on her mother's oft-repeated wisdom. Systems don't just break. They're either poorly designed or someone breaks them on purpose. But any broken system can be fixed if you understand how it works. Approaching Whitfield Tower required careful timing. The media entrance would be busy with reporters arriving for the shareholder meeting, creating potential cover. Wearing a generic school uniform purchased from a thrift store days earlier, part of their original contingency plan, Zora blended with morning foot traffic, just another child accompanying a parent to work. When a group of photographers and camera operators approached the media entrance, she slipped in behind them, head down, appearing to belong. Security was indeed heightened, with additional guards posted throughout the lobby. Moving purposefully toward the service elevators, Zora projected the confidence her mother had taught her was essential when navigating hostile spaces as a person of color. Walk like you belong there. Tiana had instructed during mother-daughter trips to upscale stores, where security often followed them suspiciously. Never show fear or hesitation. The service elevator required badge access, forcing Zora to wait until a catering employee arrived with breakfast deliveries for the executive dining room. Smiling shyly, she held the door as the woman maneuvered her cart inside, then followed as if accompanying her. "Forgot your badge, honey?" the caterer asked kindly. "Happens to my daughter all the time." Zora nodded, offering no details that might later be remembered and reported. The maintenance locker room was mercifully empty when she arrived. Her father's uniform hung exactly where he always left, it freshly laundered coveralls with the Whitfield logo and his name badge. The garment swallowed her small frame, requiring creative rolling and pinning, but the badge was what mattered. It would grant access to areas throughout the building, at least until someone thought to deactivate it. Time was her enemy now. The board meeting would begin in just over an hour, with the live-streamed shareholder presentation immediately following. According to documents they had discovered during their investigation, Cooper would present the acquisition plans at approximately 10:15, showcasing the proprietary financial modeling that justified the takeovers. That presentation was Zora's target, the moment when the company's deception would be most visible and vulnerable. Armed with her father's badge and her mother's flash drive, Zora navigated service corridors toward the main presentation hall. Her plan required accessing the building's audiovisual system specifically, the computers controlling the massive display screens, where Cooper would showcase manipulated financial data. The AV control room was typically manned by a single technician before major events, making it both a critical choke point and her best opportunity. Approaching the control room required passing through the executive corridor, a risk Zora minimized by donning a maintenance cap and pushing a cleaning cart borrowed from a supply closet. When questioned by a security guard, she mumbled about spilled coffee in the presentation hall, keeping her face down and voice deliberately pitched lower than her natural childish tone. The ruse worked, though barely the guard radioed for confirmation, but was distracted by the arrival of board members, allowing Zora to continue without verification. The AV technician, a young man named Tyler, according to his badge, looked up in surprise when Zora entered the control room. "Maintenance?" he questioned, clearly expecting an adult. "Coffee spill by the main panel," Zora explained, gesturing vaguely toward the presentation hall's stage. "They sent me to tell you to check the wiring before it starts." As hoped, Tyler hesitated, torn between his responsibilities at the control board and the potential disaster of damaged equipment. "Watch these levels," he instructed after a moment's consideration. "Don't touch anything. I'll be right back." The instant the door closed behind him, Zora moved with practiced efficiency. Her mother's flash drive contained not just evidence, but specialized software. Tiana had designed programs that could interface with the systems she had originally built for Whitfield Industries. Within seconds, Zora had connected the drive and initiated the installation, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she implemented the core of her plan. What few people knew, what even Jamal had only theorized, was that Zora Jackson had built a failsafe into Whitfield's financial reporting systems. Anticipating potential abuse, she had created a hidden protocol that, when activated, would bypass all subsequent modifications and restore the system to its original, uncompromised state. In simple terms, it would show the true numbers, not the manipulated ones Cooper and Whitfield had engineered. The installation completed with seconds to spare. Zora quickly removed the flash drive and hid beneath the control desk just as Tyler returned. "False alarm," he muttered to himself, resuming his position without noticing the subtle new icon in the system tray, a small black cat. Tiana's favorite animal, and her signature in code she considered particularly clever. For the next 45 minutes, Zora remained hidden as the control room bustled with increasing activity. Technicians checked microphones, adjusted lighting, and finalized the presentation displays. Through gaps in the equipment, she watched as the shareholder meeting began in the adjacent hall, executives congratulating themselves on record profits and visionary leadership. When Bradley Cooper took the stage at precisely 10:17, Zora prepared to activate her mother's program. "Ladies and gentlemen, shareholders and members of the press," Cooper began smoothly, his confidence absolute. "Today marks a historic expansion for Whitfield Industries. Our proprietary financial intelligence systems have identified 7 acquisition targets that promise exceptional return on investment." Behind him, screens displayed impressive-looking charts showing projected growth and synergy opportunities. What they deliberately obscured was how these companies had been systematically undermined through Whitfield's manipulation. "Our analysis indicates these companies are significantly undervalued by the market," Cooper continued, triggering the next slide in his presentation. "Due to management inefficiencies and outdated business models, they've experienced declining performance that our leadership can quickly reverse." The lie was breathtaking in its audacity. These companies had been thriving until Whitfield's coordinated attacks began. This was the moment Zora had waited for. With trembling fingers, she activated her mother's program remotely, using her phone a simple text message to the specialized software now embedded in Whitfield's presentation system. For a heart-stopping moment, Nothing happened. Then, Cooper's carefully crafted slides began glitching, his confident patter faltering as the screens behind him flickered and changed. As you can see, he began, then stopped in confusion, as the manipulated financial charts were replaced by the actual data, showing healthy companies deliberately damaged through market manipulation. There seems to be a technical, he attempted, before the screens changed again, now displaying internal emails between Whitfield executives discussing how to target vulnerable minority-owned businesses and exploit regulatory blind spots. Chaos erupted in the presentation hall. Cooper's voice rose to a shout as he demanded technical support. Security personnel rushed toward the control room, forcing Zora to abandon her hiding place. Slipping out a secondary door, she raced through back corridors as alarms began blaring throughout the building. Not fire alarms, but security alerts signaling a breach. Her father's badge still worked, allowing her through service areas as she made her way toward her final destination, the presentation hall itself. The system controls had been only the first phase of her plan. For true impact, the truth needed a voice, a human face, to explain what the documents and data meant. Fighting panic as footsteps pounded behind her, Zora reached the stage access door just as Cooper was desperately trying to regain control of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a system malfunction. Please disregard the incorrect information being displayed." Security guards swarmed the control room and technical areas, searching for the source of the disruption. None of them thought to watch for a small black girl in oversized maintenance coveralls slipping through the backstage curtains. As Cooper frantically signaled technicians to cut the video feed, Zora emerged from behind the AV panel at the side of the stage. The room froze, executives, shareholders, and media representatives staring in collective disbelief at the child now standing before them. Security personnel hesitated, uncertain about grabbing a minor on livestream being broadcast to thousands of investors worldwide. In that moment of confusion, Zora stepped forward and took the microphone that had fallen from Cooper's stunned fingers. "The system isn't broken," she declared, her voice steady despite the terror thrumming through her veins. "Someone disabled it." A profound silence descended over the presentation hall as hundreds of eyes fixed on the small figure standing center stage. Zora Jackson, 11 years old and trembling slightly in her father's oversized maintenance uniform, faced the assembled power brokers of Whitfield Industries with the quiet dignity her parents had modeled throughout her life. Behind her, the massive screens continued displaying damning evidence, internal communications, manipulated code, racist planning documents, all illuminating a conspiracy that had enriched executives while destroying minority-owned businesses. "My name is Zora Jackson," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "My father is Marcus Jackson, your maintenance supervisor who you framed for theft after he discovered documents he wasn't supposed to see. And my mother was Tiana Jackson." At the mention of her mother's name, CEO Morgan Whitfield visibly paled, his fingers gripping the armrests of his chair until his knuckles whitened. Bradley Cooper made a desperate lunge toward Zora, only to be blocked unexpectedly by Lily Chen, who stepped from the wings to stand beside the child. "These screens are showing you the truth," Zora explained, gesturing to the evidence displayed behind her. Whitfield Industries deliberately built vulnerabilities into their financial systems to commit fraud worth billions of dollars. They artificially inflated their own stock while attacking companies owned by people who look like me and my parents. As security personnel began advancing cautiously from both sides of the stage, Zora spoke faster, her words tumbling out with increasing urgency. They targeted 7 specific companies for acquisition, all led by Black, Latino, or Asian executives, then manipulated market conditions to devalue them before today's takeover vote. A murmur rippled through the shareholders as they processed this information, many already checking their phones as the company's stock began plummeting in real-time response to the unfolding scandal. When my father found financial documents in the trash, they threatened his job. When he refused to be silenced, they fabricated charges against him. When we gathered evidence, they broke into our home. Her voice broke slightly before steadying again. But what they never knew was that my mother wasn't just any programmer. Zora Jackson built the original financial systems for this company before being forced out when she raised ethical concerns about potential misuse. This revelation caused visible shock among board members, several of whom exchanged alarmed glances. Whitfield half rose from his seat, his face contorted with rage and fear, before being pulled back down by his legal counsel. My mother designed a failsafe, a hidden protocol that could restore the system to its original, honest state if someone ever tried to use it for fraud. Before she died of cancer that this company's insurance refused to cover, she taught me how to activate that safeguard. Zora held up the flash drive for all to see. The numbers you're seeing now are the real ones, not the manipulated data Mr. Cooper was about to present. The emails you're reading are actual communications between executives planning to deliberately harm minority-owned businesses for profit. As security finally reached the stage, a new commotion erupted at the main entrance to the hall. Federal agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI Financial Crimes Division poured into the room, followed by Valencia Torres and Professor Jamal Washington. The restored system triggered automated alerts to financial regulatory authorities, Zora explained, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Another safeguard my mother built in one that couldn't be disabled, even by those at the top. Cooper, finally comprehending the magnitude of what was happening, made a desperate dash toward a side exit, only to find his path blocked by agents. Across the room, several board members were already being separated for questioning, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright panic. Morgan Whitfield, ashen-faced and sweating, was being read his rights by the lead federal agent. As Zora was gently escorted from the stage, the magnitude of what she had accomplished began to sink in. Not only had she exposed the fraud and vindicated her father, but she had activated her mother's final gift, a system designed to protect integrity even when those in power sought to corrupt it. 6 months later, Marcus Jackson sat in that same boardroom, now serving on the new leadership team, restructuring Whitfield Industries under court supervision. The company, temporarily placed under receivership during investigation, was being rebuilt with transparency requirements and ethical safeguards unprecedented in corporate America. The 7 targeted companies had not only been saved from predatory acquisition, but had formed a coalition to address systemic discrimination in the technology sector. Valencia Torres had been reinstated at the Financial Crimes Division with a formal apology and back pay, while Jamal Washington now led a government task force examining similar patterns of predatory behavior in other major corporations. As for Zora, she found herself seated before Congress, testifying about corporate accountability and the need for stronger protections against financial predation targeting minority businesses. The system wasn't broken, she explained to the assembled legislators. It was deliberately disabled by those who benefited from its failure. But any system can be fixed if enough people care about making it work for everyone, not just the powerful few. The legislation being drafted bore her mother's name, Tiana's Law, ensuring that financial systems would have independent safeguards that could not be disabled even by those at the top. It mandated protection for whistleblowers and created specific penalties for predatory practices targeting minority-owned businesses. As Zora concluded her testimony, a senator asked what had motivated her to take such tremendous risks at such a young age. After a thoughtful pause, she answered, "My mother taught me that systems don't just break someone, breaks them on purpose. My father showed me that integrity matters more than comfort or safety. Together, they helped me understand that when you see injustice, you have a responsibility to fix what's broken, even when doing so is dangerous or difficult." That evening, as Marcus and Zora walked down the steps of the Capitol building, they found themselves surrounded by owners and employees of the businesses they had helped save, people whose livelihoods and dreams had nearly been destroyed by corporate greed. "Thank you for fighting when no one else would," said a woman who had founded a biotech firm that Whitfield had targeted. "You reminded us all that the system can work when brave people refuse to let it be broken." Marcus placed a proud hand on his daughter's shoulder, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Zora. You finished what she started." Zora smiled, feeling her mother's presence in that moment more strongly than she had since Tiana's death. "The system isn't broken," she whispered. as long as someone is brave enough to fix it. What did you think of Zora's journey? Her story shows how even the youngest among us can stand up against powerful systems of injustice when armed with truth and courage. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination that made you want to speak out? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can all work to build more equitable systems. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories about brave individuals fighting for justice, and share with someone who needs inspiration today. Thank you for listening, and remember, systems don't just break on their own, but with enough courage and determination, they can always be rebuilt stronger and fairer than before.